everybody, I hope that you're all doing really well. So over the past few months that I have done my booktube channel, I've had a few shout outs from other channels, which, side note, by the way, I really love it. I'm definitely the kind of person who whenever somebody says something nice about me, I'll kind of be like, oh, stop it, no. But like, in actual truth, my love language is words of affirmation. I love it when somebody tells me that I'm doing a good job, so every single time somebody does shout me out, I'm just like, oh, thank you so much. However, something that I've noticed since I've started getting shout outs from other channels is that a frequent thing that is picked up upon when people recommend my channel is they tell their viewers that I am really into historical fiction. And if I'm being honest, I don't know if that's true. I don't think of myself as being a big historical fiction reader. For starters, there are a lot of historical fiction authors that I've not gotten to. For example, I have not read any Philippa Gregory, I've not read any of Alison Weir's historical fiction, I have not read any Bernard Cornwell or Sarah Waters, and those are just big names that I feel like if I was going to call myself a historical fiction reader, I should have read by now. And also, of the historical fiction that I have read, there's a good chunk of it that I actively did not like. So in a lot of ways, I feel like, how on earth can I call myself a historical fiction fan if I dislike a good like 50% of the historical fiction that I read? However, when it comes to period costume dramas on TV or on film, then yes, definitely, I'm a big fan of historical fiction in that regard. Like, give me any sort of period piece and I am there. I just love the costumes so much. However, when it comes to historical fiction, there is something in my brain that goes, that might not be very good. And I just wanted to talk about that. Like, what are the things that really turn me off some historical fiction and not others? Because I do think at heart that I am a historical fiction fan. I've just not found the right thing. I mean, I very evidently love history. You know, I've done 2 history degrees. Like, I would not have done that if I didn't like history. But yeah, maybe I am just reading the wrong stuff. So if you have any recommendations after watching this video, please leave them down below because I will take them. The first thing that I really hate in historical fiction is an author showing all of their research on the page. This is something that I've touched upon on a couple of my book reviews, but I feel like because a lot of historical fiction authors, they spend years planning and doing all the preparation for their book, that I understand, you know, you've spent, 5 or 10 years maybe in a historic time period researching thoroughly everything about this period, that it is tempting to show all of your work on the page and be like, look at all of the things, I know everything about this time period. However, I find it so frustrating to read historical fiction sometimes because you'll just get to a page where the author has dumped so much information that is not needed. It doesn't add anything to the plot, it doesn't add anything to the characters. All it is there to do is for the author to be like, listen guys, I have done so much research into this time period. I know the Victorian period like the back of my hand. I know all of the famous people. I know all of the slang. I know so much about this time period, and so help me God, I am going to cram as much of it onto this page as possible because I've spent so much time at this time period. And yeah, it's annoying. It's really annoying. I feel like if this information is not pertinent to the plot, don't put it there. Like, yes, for an author, it is really good to do lots of research. You need to know your stuff, but it does not have to be there on the page. I think a level of info dumping in order to portray the atmosphere correctly is necessary, but you don't need so much of it. I think the most egregious example of this that I found was in The Wicked Cometh by Laura Carlin. I actually ended up DNFing this within about 30 pages because it was just constantly like, look at all the slang that I know from this time period. And I was like, no. A more recent example of this for me was Longbourn by Jo Baker. I felt there were so many instances where to try and build up this atmosphere, she would just throw in really unnecessary details from the Regency time period, and it was like, you've not done this for any real pertinent reason. You've just done this to show how much research you've done into Regency England, and it's not necessary. However, I do think that it is possible to do a lot of research and for it to not really weigh down your story. For me, I think an example I'm going to be coming back to a lot of the time is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. Now, these are very atmosphere-driven, very evocative novels. You know that Hilary Mantel has done so much research into the Tudor time period. However, I think she knows how to use her research to build atmosphere, but not to get bogged down in it. Every time that she does kind of do a bit of info dumping, I always feel like it's in context to whatever scene she's writing. So for example, Thomas Cromwell will be out in a market stall and he will take in all of the people around him and all of the stalls around him. But you know, you need to do a level of research to be able to properly, evocatively capture that time. And she does do that research, and she shows you the research on the page, but then she doesn't go to extraneous details that we don't need. Everything that is there to build the atmosphere properly. The second thing that I really hate in historical fiction is when world building and atmosphere building ends up trumping character and relationships. This is definitely related to my first point about showing too much of your research on the page, because I feel a lot of the time like historical fiction writers are worried for some reason that you're not going to remember, oh, I'm in a Victorian novel, oh, I'm in the Tudor period, oh, I'm in World War II. So they feel like they have to overcompensate by putting so much of the world building, that they've spent so much time and page coverage on building up the atmosphere, that their characters just end up being really flat. And for me, I am a character focused reader. I'm a relationships focused reader. If your characters in a historical fiction novel are not well defined, well developed, fully formed characters, I am not going to care about them. And no amount of atmosphere or historic plot is going to make me care about them. This is just something that bothers me in fiction in general, is when the characters are really swayed by the plot or by their world rather than by their own motivations and their own relationships to each other. It's just, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. This is a trap that I feel especially that World War fiction ends up getting kind of dragged into, which I can kind of understand. I understand with the World Wars, especially wanting to capture this kind of lions led by donkeys, this kind of helplessness that you are being dictated to by your circumstances rather than your own character motivations. But it still frustrates me in these books to see characters not getting a chance to shine because what's going on around them seems to be more interesting to the author. And I felt that this happened especially in Birdsong and in Atonement. Whilst I didn't dislike either of these two books, I think I gave both of them 3 stars. I often felt like their characters ended up getting lost along the way in the description of the wars that they were fighting. Entire chunks that were dedicated to building up the atmosphere that were kind of like, where were these characters that I was meant to care about? I don't know where they are. I don't know her. However, an example where I feel like character does not get trumped by the atmosphere and the history surrounding it is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. And once again, this is another World War focused narrative, because this is set in World War II in Nazi Germany, but I feel like the focus is still firmly on the characters and their relationships and building up a real dynamic between all of these people within this town, though mainly on the one family of the Hubermans, which meant that when the war did encroach ever more onto these characters' territories, I cared more, because you feel as a reader like you have built a rapport with this family that you don't want them to be torn apart. And the third thing, and maybe one of the most egregious things that I hate in historical fiction, is distorting or twisting the facts for the sake of drama. It's at this point that I am going to start bringing in film and TV that does this as well, because I feel like there are more examples I can think of. Because often if I hear that a book really does distort the facts, I will be tempted to not read it. That is one of the main reasons that I haven't picked up Philippa Gregory, is because I hear that she often does kind of twist things. When I heard, for example, about the other Boleyn girl and the portrayal of Mary and Anne Boleyn, Anne being kind of like this manipulative, scheming, evil character, and Mary being this virtuous, innocent, and I'm just like, okay now. I've also seen bits and pieces of television shows that were adapted from Philippa Gregory novels, so I've seen The White Princess and I've seen little bits of The Spanish Princess, and the amount of things that they twist for the sake of drama, I'm just like, why? For example, like I know that in The Spanish Princess, Elizabeth of York is made out to be an antagonist to Catherine of Aragon, like she doesn't like her very much, and it's like, really? Really? Because we need to have some sort of girl on girl drama? Why? Elizabeth Woodville is apparently a witch now? Fine. I know I've mentioned a few times that I'm not a big fan of making female characters into the witch trope, just because you don't know what to do with them and you don't know any other way of showing that they're different to the other women in their town. Like, I hate it so much. Spoilers for The White Princess, but making Margaret Beaufort the one who killed the princes in the tower. Okay, and Henry VII finds this out and he knows. Fine, okay, right. I feel like there is a lot of creative license that you can take, but I feel like a lot of the time twisting and distorting facts in historical fiction often is just to create drama and tension, and it's like, history's already dramatic and tense enough. We don't need to completely overhaul characters in history just to make some sort of point. However, I do think there are instances where this can work. Bringing it right back around to the Wolf Hall trilogy, I feel like Hilary Mantel does some really interesting commentary with slightly distorting facts in order to get her point across. In trying to make Thomas Cromwell a slightly more sympathetic character and bring up the bodies, there is a lot of ambiguity around Thomas Cromwell's use of torture. And because it seems like the main focus of this story is really to show show how Thomas Cromwell has been vilified throughout history, and because there aren't a lot of sources directly from Thomas Cromwell's hand, I feel like she works it really, really well. Because the Tudor court is such a big propaganda machine, you can completely understand why maybe some areas of fact are not the facts that we know. You can definitely read this and kind of be convinced that, hey, maybe there's a lot that Henry VIII buried. Doesn't necessarily mean that it is true, but at least it gives you something interesting to think about in the ways that history is preserved or destroyed, because we know that Henry VIII liked to bury a lot of the things that he didn't like. I also think in the movie Mary Queen of Scots, which I know was quite a contentious movie for a lot of Tudor fans, I actually really liked the way that they dealt with a meeting between Elizabeth and Mary. So one of the biggest spoilers of the film, which was blasted everywhere by different media outlets, was the fact that there is a scene within Mary Queen of Scots where Mary and Elizabeth do meet, which historically, as far as we know, did not happen. The two communicated via letter, but they never met face to face. However, they did take a bit of creative license with the film and had them meet. The reasoning being is that through this film we've had these two women interacting and referencing each other throughout the entire thing, that it was just emotionally satisfying to have them meet face to face. However, they kind of cover this in terms of the historiography by it being mentioned right up front that this is a secret meeting and that Elizabeth will deny that it ever happened, which I feel like as an audience member you can kind of accept and think, well, yes, once again, there's a big Tudor propaganda machine going on. Maybe a meeting did happen and we just don't know about it because records were not kept. This is not me trying to say that I think they did actually meet when they didn't. However, I do think it is really important if you are a historical fiction writer and you are making the choice to distort the facts, to twist the facts in some way, that you have to cover yourself. I feel like you can't just manipulate the facts to tell the story that you want to tell. And I feel like there's so many areas of history that are ambiguous where we don't know exactly what happened. Why don't you mess with that rather than messing with the stuff that we do know? Or if you are going to mess with the stuff that we know, then you've got to do it in a clever way. Think about how it might make sense in your world for things to not appear necessarily as we think of them. Plant that seed in your audience's mind that maybe there is evidence that we just don't have. And for example, do not just make Anne Boleyn the villain because you need to make Mary Boleyn the hero. I feel like as an author, your choices need to be more motivated than that. But yes, those are my main 3 reasons for not loving historical fiction as much as I wish that I did. I definitely want to dip my toes more into historical fiction. I feel like especially during lockdown, I've been doing that a lot more because I want to love historical fiction as much as I love historical non-fiction and as much as I love TV shows and films that are based around history. Maybe it's just that I can't see the costumes. That's likely. Do leave me below any recommendations for historical fiction that you think that I might like. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic, fantastic day and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye!